Do we all
All
have
right.
to cover this
Hey,
time?
no, I bought a digital copy because I
Oh, okay.
couldn't find one. Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a long time. Um, Life has been insane. Insane. Yeah, just a little bit insane. But we're back and we're going to be talking about Marrying Mozart by Stephanie, I think Cowell. That's
Mhm.
Cowell.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It was my pick this week, or this time. And the reason why I picked it was I was looking through some of the choices and I was like, oh, I want something light but like salacious. And I personally myself, I've never read like Pride and Prejudice and any of those types of books or Little Women, but all the reviews were like it's kind of like that type of book. It's all like the kind of like the machinations of like all of the family and all the stuff. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I've never done something like this, and I think through reading this book, I kind of want to jump into some of those books just to see how that was influenced based off
Mhm.
of this. Also, I found it really interesting at this book that there was actually some historical, like factual evidence of some of the stuff happening. So I was like, oh, it's not just like a tale of fiction. There's actually quite a lot of historical accuracy in some of this stuff here. So that's why I picked it. I was like something nice and short, something fun. It read quick for me, very, very quick for me. And it was
Agreed.
kind of fun. And it's a composer that I think the three of us like, I hope. But it was interesting kind of like diving into personal stories. Like I think like with my kind of limited knowledge on Mozart, um, it was kind of like the book where we read with Mahler, kind of diving a little bit more into like kind of like the behind the stories, and it could have been fictional, but
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting to make these people, they were side characters, right? They weren't the main character, they're side characters, but it was still interesting to talk about and hear about the people around them and what was going on and why they were the way they were, and having an author try to comprehend how these characters, why they were feeling this way and what they were doing. So I found it kind of interesting. I do have opinions about this story. But before we start, Amanda, how have you been? How is the mainland?
Oh, it's good. It's interesting. It is what it is. Report cards coming up, and Mike and I are just hanging out at home because we're both high risk. So it's working home, and every couple of weeks we go get groceries, and that's about it. So
Are you on the like term system? Like in 2 weeks, the term is, or less than 2 weeks, it's done, and then it's the next couple of classes, or
uh,
K7 is different?
no, that's like the high school. That's like high
Okay.
school one. We're still all year round because elementary, right? But yeah, our term ends. Our report cards are due at the end ish of this month. Um,
Okay.
so we're all frantically trying to figure out the new report cards and how we're going to assess them because there are no grades anymore where I am. So everything is on a different scale. So that's interesting, especially for
So is it like no grades as in like there's not even like a satisfactory good anything anymore? Like
it.
there's no value in anything anymore. It's just like
It
this is how this person was doing and the progress kind of stuff.
it's basically a 4 point scale where it's like proficient is I think the highest one. It's like emerging and proficient or proficient's on the side emergency, emerging, developing, proficient, and then I think something else like on the top end. And it's like it's those four and that's it. There's no actual grades or anything.
Okay.
So
So it's more like using descriptive words rather than your
yeah,
value, quote
yeah, yeah,
unquote.
exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Are you finding that with that new system, you have to spend more time like spending on each report card explaining to the parent like why this child is proficient in this thing, why this child is emerging versus like is it, they got an A plus. Everyone knows what an A plus is.
Yeah, we haven't. That is actually something that a bunch of us are working together on. A bunch of music teachers around our district are working on. What does it look like to be an emerging learner? What does it look like to be a developing learner? So I believe we went over each one when in our last Prody, and some of the most wonderful people in my district actually went down and kind of broke down each four with each of the competencies. So we can change that as we can with our students and explain this is how it's going to look in your next report card. Now, the thing is, I teach kindergarten, so some parents will take it, some parents will leave it. Some of my kids are asking me for a grade. They're like, I want a letter. You can give me the whatever scale you want, but I want a letter. So some of the kids are still driven by like, I want to get an A, I want to get a B, I want to get a C. So it depends. It kind of depends.
Yeah, it makes sense because like even with some of the kids I teach, like I find that some parents are still motivating their kids like, oh, if you get a B, then you get this. If you get an A, then you get this. Right? There's like that kind of like that reward system that's kind of built in, and it's easier for kids to be like, look, right? This like, I mean, even now, like there's still parts of my life where I was like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we went back to college and we just got a grade on like how well I cook? How well I plan my week. Wouldn't that be amazing? Someone just grading me, and it would make me feel so good if I got like at least a B plus.
Right? Well, you get a grade, like you get an A in financial management. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, and it's interesting that like at least your district is doing this change, because I know for a fact for myself, the huge change from going through school and then doing life and then not having any feedback on how well I was doing. Like that was a huge shock for my system, because I was like, all of a sudden I was like, oh, like there's no, in 4 months I get a progress report. I just have to progress forever.
Yeah. You just kind of guess along the way because life, But other than that, like everything is as it is. We're kind of just waiting for things to be done. We just want COVID to be done. We don't know when the hell COVID's going to be done, but
right. And right now, like all three of us are still waiting for the actual government to be finalized, because we're still waiting for the votes to be done. So until then, it's like there's no like budget hearings or any changes in anything moving forward. So it's like we're kind of all on our like toes, I guess, just kind of like just on our tippy toes, just waiting for like to see what's happening, what's the next like relief efforts, what are plans moving forward. So like yeah. Karen, how are you? We were just talking about your 2 dogs, but how are you specifically?
I'm doing all right. Still trying to figure out how to balance things. I don't know. It's
all new animals.
I know.
All new animals. I know. So we got 2 new dogs yesterday. They're new to us. They're new to us. So they worked on a farm before. So they are working dogs. They're the types of dogs that are probably outside all of the time. They're Great Pyrenees and Akbash. So they're used to being in cold weather. So we're okay with them being out. And they basically prowl at night. Like they guard the place and then sleep during the day.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Are you going to get more ducks?
More ducks. I might be rethinking the ducks. The ducks came as sort of like a package deal when we got the goats. It was like
I just love these deals.
Trying to get a deal on the goats, and the lady was like, I'll throw in ducks, I'll throw in roosters. So we got, it was like 18 ducks and 4 roosters along with the goats.
Yeah. So I don't think I've ever asked you this, but like I know that you're essentially I don't want to put it this way, but you're collecting animals right now. No.
It does feel like that,
but with the animals, are you guys trying to be like self-sustaining at some point, or are you planning to actually sell products or anything at some point?
Okay, so the sheep we want to lamb to sell.
Okay.
We have the goats for milk. We have the chickens for meat and eggs, and we have the cows for meat. The ducks are useless. I
mean, for Chinese people,
adorable.
I was
trying to say, like, for Chinese people, we love roast duck.
I like duck is amazing. It's so good.
Because that's why I was asking. I was like, for the ducks, I was like, I understand the chickens because eggs and meat. I understand the cows. I understand, but for ducks, it's very specific. It's like people don't really have, especially in North America, they don't really have an appetite for duck eggs or duck, because people tend to find duck to be very greasy or oily and a little bit more lean than chicken, right?
Yeah. it's a little tougher to cook.
Yeah.
Duck eggs though are popular here.
Ooh, okay.
Basically, they taste like regular eggs. They're just ginormous.
Yeah. Well, and like the yolk itself is more rich as well because it's a little bit larger. Yeah.
Yes,
like I love duck eggs. Like
Yummy.
it's just you can't
But
find
you know
them.
what? Our chicken eggs, because we're feeding them and we let them kind of like graze and find bugs and stuff, we find that the yolks they're basically orange compared to supermarket where they're like very light yellow. They're very dark, they're very dense. And John will just like take out the egg white and just eat the yolk because the yolk is like so nutritious.
Yeah, no, it's like that's the thing is like with the supermarket ones, like if you were to hard boil them, they get that little gray stuff.
I know.
No. You can pop an egg. You know Gaston, right? We would have 4 dozen eggs every morning to help him get large. So it's. I mean, if we have Gaston, I mean, like something's all right.
Oh my God.
But I'm glad you're doing okay.
And if ever you need a time, you could have a petting zoo. Just saying, you could.
Yeah, this is very true. Right now, it's more just inviting people over and being like, "Look at the animals."
You know what you should do? You should like I mean, like these are like just like you should like invite people over, but then be like, okay, you can stay with us for free, but you have to help us out for the week you're here.
Ooh, yeah, I am down for that.
It's been really interesting because the people who have come and visited, they literally would be there for a day and then they would go, okay, what can I help with?
Mm-hmm.
Love it. Yeah.
So
yeah.
Like I actually haven't had to ask for a lot of help because people that just visit are totally down. Like my brother-in-law came over and within like 5 minutes of him being there, he put on like long sleeve shirt and he found some gloves and he's like, I'm ready to help haying.
Yeah. Like I was gonna say, like I would love doing that too. Like I'm up at 5 every morning anyways.
Oh yeah, you like the was it CrossFit, right?
Yeah. So I used to do CrossFit in the morning, so now I'm just up at 5 every morning. And I was like, well, I got nothing else to do. So if I'm ever over, totally let me huck some hay.
Yeah.
I want to share a sheet.
If you we'll call you then. We'll call you up next year when we're doing all of the square bales because each bale I think is about 40 pounds. So
yeah.
heavy,
and if anything has to do with working out and me getting a good tan, I will do it. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll put your name down.
Yeah.
I'll put you down
Please
on the calendar.
do. I would love to come over.
Let's have a Musetta Stone party at the farm. I would love that.
Amanda can watch me hockey.
I think I can.
Oh, you can like pick
definition. I will try.
You can pick eggs and stuff. Go around like grabbing eggs and then doing stuff. Oh, I would love to. Oh, this is so okay. I'm totally down for this.
Yes. Party at Karen.
It's just like we'll bring food and everything. You don't even need to feed us if you don't want to. We just want to help. All right, let's go to this book. So, as I said before, I chose this because I was intrigued by all of the reviews that were online. And unfortunately, I don't have a physical book just because I couldn't find one out in the open. And it would have taken some of the bookstores here way too long. They couldn't, like I asked Russell Books and they're like, oh, we could get one, but we don't know if it will come in 4 days or 4 months. So I was like, I'm not chancing it. So I got the digital version. So unfortunately, like this would have been one that I would have loved to have on my shelf. Just because it's so cute.
I got mine from Indigo.
Amazon.
Okay. I don't know why. I just didn't think about doing it online this time. I don't know why.
You wanted to support local businesses. You were a little bit better than us.
No. That's not that. No, it's not that. It's like I know where both of you live, and I don't think there's a bookstore within 2 kilometers of where you guys live, right?
No, yeah, I have like a giant Indigo down in Langley. That's
but like a local bookstore.
Oh, like a local? Yeah, not really.
We do. We have a cute little bookstore. I've already scoped it out. I'm so excited.
But no, I don't know. I'm a snob. Like someone was like, oh, like if you go to Pizza Hut, it's like really super cheap. I was like, yeah, but Romeo's is across the street and they're local.
Yeah.
No. Like no judgment there. It's just like I understand. Like I understand I'm privileged and everything, but
It's,
Yeah.
it's totally okay. We are trying to be a little bit better with where we are shopping, just because of like the big stores are going to be fine.
Yeah.
But it's the smaller businesses that we really want to keep afloat, right? Because they're not doing as well.
Yeah. But aside from that, at one point I'm gonna get a physical copy of this because I do want to keep this. I've been actually looking through my book collection and be like, what do I want to keep? So I have a stack of books that I kind of want to give away. It's not the right time to give away right now because of COVID, but once it's safer. But I guess since I chose this book, why don't I start first with my like feelings about it? Interestingly enough, it was kind of the last time when we read Under the Visible Life.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting because that book, my original feeling was like, it's so weird flipping back and forth with these two people. Why can't they just be separate? And then like after discussing it, I was like, no. Like you guys convinced me that it makes more sense for them to be blended together because it doesn't make sense for it to be chronological separate. With this one here, I started reading through and I was like, I really don't care about this, like going back in time and then coming back to the present with Sophie Weber.
Yeah.
I was like, cut Sophie out. Just give me the entire story. Like I understand that she was trying to be like, oh, this person is like chronologuing what's happening, right? But it was just like I would read and then it would jump back to Sophie and I'd be like, I don't really care about this.
You know what it reminds me of? It's like the movie Titanic.
Oh yes.
Where the lady looks back on her life and is like, this is what my life was like.
Yeah.
But at least it's short. Like it's like 2 or 3 pages of like, I found this box of stuff. Here's my next story. Like at least it's not drawn out.
Yeah. I think for me personally though, it's just like if they took that all of the interludes of her in between away, I would have been totally fine. If it was just like a beginning, like bookmark beginning and end, I would have been totally fine because it would have been just a complete retelling. I just found that sometimes I'll read, I'm like, yes. And then, oh, okay, I'm going to read quickly and then keep on going. So I did read everything, but it was just like, for me, I was like, it felt a little bit jarring because I always felt like I was getting into the story. It got really big and all of a sudden I had to jump out of there, come back to here and then go back again. Because every single time it was like, oh, so-and-so came back with the box of chocolates, right? Every single time, right? And it's
so
like,
for you, it didn't add anything.
No, not really. Like I understood why after reading the end and we knowing that like Sophie Weber was interviewed. What is this person? The Englishman's name?
Novello.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And I understand like why, because it was like, because he came multiple days to talk about that. But for me, I would have been like, just say it at the end. It's like, Mr. Novello came multiple days to talk to me about blah, 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 and this is my story. And then that was it.
I think it also lent like, because I think one of the first things I said to Karen on Facebook was like, there are no chapters in this. Hell.
Yeah.
I think like the little shots, even though I could, like, again, like you, I could have done without them, but it kind of gave like a little bit of a break in between the chunks of what was happening. And for me, that helped just because it just gave me like, all right, I can put this down and then finish off with Sophie's three pages and then pick it up later and I can still go. I've given myself like a little bit of a mental break instead of trying to flip back the past 5 pages.
So here's why, sorry, I just had this thought of like why it probably doesn't work is because when we go back in time, it's not told first person from Sophie's perspective. It's told from every single sister's perspective and Mozart's.
Well, it's third person.
Kind of like, how did you know what Mozart was thinking? Like, you're close, but you're not in his head thinking about how funny he is. Like, it's like you're not there. So maybe that was the disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, other than that,
okay.
I found it really intriguing. I found myself going back to my like history textbooks and stuff and reading because like I have the RCM textbook. I have all of them. I still have the textbooks from college. And I went back and I was like, we actually studied this. I just glossed over it. So I was like, this is so cool. And then like the author did acknowledge that she had to switch around some of the order of things to fit the story a little bit better, but she acknowledged that. So I was like, oh, okay, I can, like, this is a work of fantasy. Okay, that's fine. I can like suspend my disbelief there. That's fine. But I was like, that's just really cool. I love it when I read a book where I have to like go back to some of my old notes and like read stuff. And I don't often do a lot, like referencing certain things and going back. But this is one of the few ones where I was like, I was so intrigued about all of this. I was like, oh, this is great. I guess the one thing that I wished was the book didn't stop right at the marriage. I was like marrying Mozart. I was hoping for like actually the domestic part of marrying Mozart, because we, like, from historical documentation, we know for a fact that his relationship with Constance Weber was constantly up and down because he was really bad with money. Right. And I would have loved a little more of that, but it was kind of like it was almost like everything started off good, and then there was like bad, and then the wedding at the end makes it all good again, kind of thing. Almost like a movie. So I was like, I wish there was a little bit more, but the stuff that I did read, I was pretty happy with. I just wanted a little bit more. I wanted maybe the story of up until he died, kind of thing, and how that relationship was, because they had children, right? And they were together, and he wrote for like Josefa, I think Josefa, right? And he did, he did write for Constance, and he did write, like, I wanted a little bit more of that, but what I got, I was really happy with. Yeah. What about you guys?
Amanda?
I actually really enjoyed this, and I wonder, and I, like you, was kind of, it ended, I'm like, oh, okay, it just kind of ends with, okay, they're getting married, cool, I guess that's a happily ever after. But I think part of it was like there has been more like research and more information about the marriage afterwards than before. Because I remember reading this, I'm like, oh, Salieri is in this. Ooh, we're gonna get some drama. Except I know that they didn't really have like the huge feuds and stuff. But I don't honestly remember the Weber sisters when we studied Mozart in school. So this whole like build up, like everybody knew that he was a child prodigy. And then there was like, this chunk. And then there is him getting married, and then he has all this, I guess you can say, fame now that the opera's out and stuff. But I feel like she chose this chunk specifically because it's the part that nobody really knows about. Nobody talks about Alonzia or Josefa before they were really in Mozart's world. Like the professional part. For me, I had a lot of fun with this. I really I went through all the emotions with this and all the stuff of like, oh, you dirty girl, versus like, I want to slap you in the face. I was really into this one, and it kind of like humanized Mozart a lot, because you see him in the history books of being like this kind of prideful little kid and then a prideful adult. But then, how Cowell has framed him makes it seem like, he was, a starving artist for a long time, and he struggled, and he fell in love, and he had heartbroken, and all the normal things that people do. And it kind of like gave a new light to this composer that for the three of us, we look at more like, oh, Mozart, right? So that was me. Karen?
I liked it. I didn't love it. Okay. So one of the comparisons that they put was with Little Women, and I can totally see that because it is very episodic. It's very like, here's a little arc here, and here's a little arc here, and here's a little arc here. But at the end of it, I'm kind of like, what happened? I don't know. I have this bad feeling that a year from now, I'm not going to remember any of this. I enjoyed reading it while I was reading it, and it read really quickly, and it was quaint, it was cute, it was frustrating, it was like, oh, that was interesting, oh, I know that, there were all those things in it, but I feel like it's not going to stick with me. Like, there wasn't anything that stuck out to me. So it's like it's an average rating for me. Like it's an average book. It's not bad or anything, and I would recommend it to people.
Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
sort of where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
Do you think that had there been no comparison at all, like, because I think like I said, I haven't read Little Women, but now I actually have it on my iPad now. I'm going to read it. From the kind of like, even some of the reviews, they were just like, oh, this is like Little Women light. You know, like
I would say it's more dramatic than Little Women.
I honestly hated Little Women. So I tried, I think 3 times to read it. I'm like, I just can't. I did love Pride and Prejudice. And the thing that I can fully connect between Pride and Prejudice is that whole you need to marry in your class or higher above. That is your job as a woman. You need to you cannot go lower than your class. You do not talk to these artists. You look for an earl or a duke or a king or whatever. That was kind of like the big thing that I got. That was Pride and Prejudice, and just like the social conventions, how you're supposed to act in public as a woman of culture and stuff like that. That was the biggest thing. But you, like Karen, you've read Little Women, so you would know better than me. I can't do Little Women. I'll try it again now that I'm 35.
Well, I mean, I read it when I was like a teenager. So the thing that I could draw the obvious comparison is the fact that it's 4 sisters. But the issue is that these 4 sisters are way more turbulent and way more like there is more jealousy, more fighting, more hard feelings. Like, yes, they are trying to stay together, but it just like they're a mess. Whereas Little Women is like they are close, and their mother keeps them close. Like that's the whole thing, is that they are family together. Whereas this one is like the mother almost made it worse and tormented. So that's why I wouldn't say it's Little Women light. I would say it's Little Women turbulent.
It's like Little Women meets like, I don't know, the real world.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, because I think like the interesting thing for me is like I don't tend to. So the books that I like reading are sci-fi, high fantasy. They don't delve into emotion unless it's like, you know, like my husband doth died, right? And then it's like this like grandiose emotion, but like they don't talk about the jealousy or that stuff too much. It's always just like a glance over. They spend more time talking about the world and the ship that you're on and that beautiful, majestic giraffe dragon that you're going to fly on, right? They don't talk about inner feelings and stuff like this, right? So for me, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, I feel bad all the time reading this. Everyone's making everyone miserable. Girl, leave. But it's just like it's but you know what I mean? It's just like the drama of like, oh, of course, but you know what I mean? Like, of course, like they're gonna feel this way because like if convention says you must be pretty, you must be educated, you must do all these things.
Yeah.
Of course, like especially if your mom is constantly literally pitting you against each other, right? And having all these machinations and schemes behind, like at one point your relationship will be destroyed because she's literally telling you to go after this person, and then you like, you know, like, and it's always like, oh, you're my most beautiful daughter. Well, then of course all the other girls are gonna feel jealous, right? And oh, this eldest daughter, her feet are so big, I can barely, like, I can't even tell people. I need to tell the shoemaker to like hide the feet. And I was like, oh, you know what? I don't read a lot of books in this era, in this time period. But back then it would have been like small feet or dainty feet and everything. If you're too tall, you're not going to find a suitor because people don't want to marry a tall person. And a lot of these things are still happening now, right? Like people are still like, oh, you're too tall. Like, don't be a tall person, right? Like, I remember like Christy, like when she had her wedding, she had to wear kitten heels because she didn't want to be taller than Titan. Yeah. Because they're about the same height, right? I was like, even then, like conventions like that still happen now. I was like, wow. But like, yeah, for me, I've never really read something like this before.
This reminded me a lot of, as you were talking about not reading something from this era, was it Music and Silence?
Music and Silence. I was going to say Music and Silence. Yes.
It reminds me a little bit of
I think that was before. The time period was slightly before this one, I think.
Yeah, because that would have been the jongleurs, troubadours, trouvères.
But that one was more so about the court versus like living actually within like the public.
Yeah, and struggling.
Yeah.
Well, because like I think it was a cool time capsule, like kind of jumping into, because I think personally for myself, when I read music history and stuff, I just go, oh, all these musicians, they were just doing so well back then because people loved music. No, they were still struggling. They were still struggling.
Hard.
Yeah, right. And you're just like, oh, like there weren't as many people back then.
Yeah.
But the amount of opportunities were way less because there weren't as many people. There weren't as many opportunities. And it was like, oh, you work for this opera house, you're the enemy, right? That kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting because right now we kind of live in a world where it doesn't matter as much. But to think to like glorify the past as like this time where like classical music was like revered, it was revered, but it was just as difficult, even for someone as talented as like some of like the oldest two Weber sisters and Mozart to kind of break into, because like it's like, oh, like Josefa, you have a really beautiful voice, you're just too tall.
Yeah.
Like no one's gonna fall in love with you because your voice is so rich and dark. We want something light. We want angelic. Sorry. Like and you're like, wow, like that's crazy. But it happens nowadays too. It's just like if your voice type isn't good, sorry, you don't get the part.
Yeah. And it kind of really kind of spotlighted on how even now the idea of networking is like such a huge thing. When we talk about it in history, it's like Mozart's here, Haydn's here, so-and-so's here. So like they're all so individual. And then reading his book when he's like, Haydn, my awesome friend, he's like, let me put in a good word for you. Let me help you out here. Let me get you connected with this person. And the idea that even though we know that these composers are fairly close in geography, that they actually connected and networked and they helped each other out is like kind of like a brain explosion from all the histories that we've talked about, because we learn about them in individuals, right? We don't learn about them as like.
Well, and also just the fact that because it just so happens you are friends with a horn player, you write a lot of horn music.
Yeah.
Right. Like you are surrounded by these two women who are really good at singing, so you write the Queen of the Night aria for Josefa. Like,
love that,
right? Yeah. It's like, and that's so cool, right? Like to be like, oh, you are literally influenced and inspired by the people that are around you, and even with the whole like you were talking about the idea of like putting in a good word. Even though Haydn put in a good word, other people can completely shut you out if they want to.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with you, or it could be, right? It's just like, hey, we know you're a genius. You're unreliable. Like we need the opera, and you just couldn't deliver. And we needed an opera, and we love your music, but loving your music and actually having the music ready is two completely different things.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like it was so interesting because I mean, like there was that one part in the story where like she writes in Mozart's like head, and he's just like, should I have just been a mediocre musician?
Yeah.
Like just put on a livery, do what my father does, do what Haydn does, and just have a good living and just be happy, right, with what I'm doing, with instead of just having all these fancy dreams of writing all this beautiful stuff. And you're just like, this is so interesting. He might have had those feelings, we don't know, but without him actually having tried constantly, we wouldn't have had all his operas, right? But
well, it's interesting the section where he goes and gets the job with the Archbishop. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I need a job so that I can support my family, so I'm taking this job. And then he was literally like, it's soul crushing, I can't do it. It's shallow. I can't just write you a violin piece just like on a whim, just like I'm done. I can't, because there's no time then for me to do my other stuff. And like that's a thing that lots of musicians and composers experience now.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, we know from like our history lessons back then, if you didn't have a patron, like if you were a freelance musician, it was difficult. It's not like it's easy now, but like back then, like it was almost like a death sentence to your career if you didn't have someone supporting you. And like we often like look at Haydn and be like, look at Haydn, right? He did this. It's like, well, like Haydn, like they say this briefly, like we know he was a choir boy and his voice changed. He was kicked onto the street. He was a freelance musician, and somehow through his luck and maybe his networking, he got into the Esterházys. But he just so happens to be someone who just fit that that type of career very well. And you have to remember, like once the Esterházy prince died and the next prince came along, that next prince didn't like music, so he had like Haydn fired. Right? It's just like that. Like you don't like something, you're gone. And so like yes, Haydn was actually like in the end of his life was still put into like a pauper's grave. Because he didn't have any money, right? It wasn't until the Esterházy family found out that they didn't have Haydn's bones that they became embarrassed, and then they repatriated the bones, right? But it's like actually I have a video on that. You guys should watch. It's hilarious. But it's like even Haydn in his like late in life, right, struggled, right, and everyone just remembers him as being like this person who worked for the Esterházys, and even in the book, everyone glorified that. He's like, oh, he's working for the Esterházys. It must be amazing. And Haydn, like we know from like history that he didn't end up dying rich or dying well off or whatever, right? Even someone as quote unquote fit for the role as Haydn, it could have been just changed like that, right? But like I find it really endearing because it was just like Mozart would fancy. It's like, oh, maybe I'll move to London. Like George Friedrich Handel did very well in London. I can speak English. I could do that. Or what if I go to Paris? Like anywhere is better than this like stupid place called Munich, right? But it's like you're like, this is so cool because like that's what people think now. Is like, oh, if I just go to a different city, someone else made it, I can make it too. I can find gigs. I can do those things, right? And him struggling to like get people to trust him because he grew up and there was a certain type of reputation, right, that he already had. And unfortunately, your reputation like continues with you. It's like, oh, I was the child prodigy, and no one cares about me now because I'm no longer a child prodigy. I was like, man, like that's a lot what a lot of people feel nowadays too, right? So it was like that.
Yeah. And it's a lot of stuff. It's just entertainment in general. Like you look at, like kid stars on movies and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, they get all these roles because they're cute and small and young, and then they grow up and young. Hey, you're no longer cute anymore, so we're not going to get any more roles. It's interesting to read something of an era like this and then think, well, if you just changed a few things around, this is a pretty good and accurate reflection of what it is to be around now, because you're still depending on networking, you're still depending on being at the right place at the right time, you're still being dependent on like that validation from other people of whether you are good enough in your art, or do I, like Haydn, just settle and just have an okay life, but at least your paycheck is a steady paycheck.
Yeah. Do you think Mozart cared about what other people thought of him?
I think it depends on the person. He cared if it could help him, but if it didn't, then he didn't. Like what's his name? The guy that his dad wanted him to work for. He's like, you want me to do this?
The Archbishop?
Yeah, the Archbishop. And he's like, it's not gonna help me in my career, so whatever, I don't give a crap.
Yeah, I think I think the thing is, but here's the thing, it's indicative to people who are extremely talented.
Yeah.
He only, like, out of all the characters that are in the story, the only one person he actually cared, whose opinion he cared, was Haydn.
Yeah. Yeah.
He only cared because he revered Haydn at this level. Everyone else was below him.
Yeah.
His employers, everyone was below him.
Haydn's basically a peer, right? Yeah. In that he's in the exact spot as
successful
musician, whereas your patron doesn't know anything about music. They just say, oh, I want a violin piece that's 3 minutes long. Well, that's not
Yeah.
inspired.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like it's really interesting because like there's a huge juxtaposition. Like we don't know much about Haydn's life because it wasn't about Haydn, but like through history we knew that while he was being employed by the Esterházys, he was writing a lot of music constantly. Just like Bach, when Bach was working for the Lutheran Church, he was writing a ton of music every week, right? Whereas Mozart was just like, I don't feel like finishing this flute concerto. Meh. And he's like, but you don't get commission if you don't do it. I don't really feel like doing it anymore. I want to write music for this soprano now. And you're like, but you're not going to make money off of it, right? So, but I think it's just like, you're right. It's like, if you're not a peer, who cares? Like Mozart didn't care because he knew that most of you people would not understand the genius of this music, right? And even like they said, right, with Idomeneo was like, it's like, it was so grandiose, it was so beautiful, too tragic.
Yeah.
Right?
It was too old for the time.
Yeah. You know, and the thing was like, we know from like our scant records in our history books that Idomeneo wasn't a big hit. But to kind of like go through Mozart's life and be like, oh, it wasn't a big hit, but it took a toll on him because he really loved that opera. He thought he was going to do really well with that opera and do well. And it just so happens that unfortunately it wasn't him. It was just the tastes were changing.
Yeah.
Right? They wanted something a little bit more salacious. So he was like, oh, what about this one about a Turkish harem? Right? And that one was his success. And we know for a fact that Marriage of Figaro was his biggest success because of the salacious nature of the story. It was making fun of aristocrats and all of their like machinations and stuff, right? Like you're like, oh, even he had to bow to the interests of the time. Because if not, you weren't going to be successful. Like by the time Haydn met Mozart, Haydn's music was considered old school.
Yeah.
Right? Like people didn't want to listen to it anymore.
Yeah. But that's what the Esterházys wanted. They're like, we like our traditional, we like our, you know, steady things, steady as it goes. And Haydn's like, all right, why not?
But yeah, but I think it's like, to go back to that thing, it's like, yeah, I think Mozart only cared about Haydn. Haydn was like, oh, I have your music, I have your scores, and I love them. And he was just like, oh my God, you have my scores? You like, you read them? Oh my God, right? Like
he like fanboyed hard, yeah.
Because like Mozart didn't even care about his father and what his father thought of his music. He cared about Haydn, right? Yeah. And to have Haydn's like say that it was like high praise, and we know that they had a friendship. Yeah. Right? They dedicated music to each other. I thought that was kind of cute. Yeah. So why don't we talk a little bit more about the mother?
Oh, the mother.
So much, like there was so much to unpack because like we start off with the father and the mother, and the father was beautiful, Fridolin, and how essentially he was pretty much the glue that was keeping the family together, right? Yeah. And even though some of the things that he wanted to do, like constantly have friends over and like essentially spend all the money to to entertain friends, that was one of the things that everyone enjoyed. Not the mother because she wasn't musical, but like the daughters really enjoyed it, and like it was like their Thursday nights. And like once the father passed away, the mother essentially was free to essentially do whatever she wanted. And scheme and try to do things. And it was interesting because I was like, I don't know much about the historical context and culture of the time, but like, I know that like, I mean, parents plan constantly, right? But it's like this, I found, even though that I was frustrated with the mother, I could forgive her for some of the things that she did. Just because of the humanity of like she was trying to look out for her daughters, but also trying to look out for herself because she's a widow. She has nothing without some type of security, and she needed that security. If not, she was gonna die destitute, like on the street, right?
Yeah, it's sort of how Mrs. Bennet is basically. In fact,
well, I would not put Mrs. Bennet to the level that this mother has gone.
No, well, what if Mr. Bennet had passed away?
If Mr. Bennet, I can understand because Mrs. Bennet is very much just like she didn't have a notebook, but she was pretty dang close to having a notebook. Yeah. And it's true. And I actually commend Stephanie Cowell for writing the mother in a way where you don't realize just how nuts she is until like near the ending. And you're like, oh God, she is really working hard. And you kind of, and I don't know if this is like the teacher perspective or whatever, but by the end, I was looking at mom and I'm like, I wonder if mom's slightly bipolar, because she has these like high lows, these low lows, high highs, where she either is, come here, my little fleas, I love you so much, let's be a family, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, you go seduce Mozart right now. You get in his pants, you get him married, and you get on him. And then the next day you're like, you will never marry an artist. He's not good enough for you. Like it's, and that slow, like kind of descent into madness was kind of like an interesting, yeah, for me anyway, reading that. But yeah, I understand the frustration with that woman. Ooh, yeah.
But there was sort of a hint to when she was a small girl and she was writing fantasies about her own sisters, but they weren't real.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
So this was something that's like
around.
Yeah. So this is why I could forgive her, because up until the last part where Josefa finally confronts her mom about her paternal lineage, we were just like, what the hell is going on, woman? But then you realize, oh, first of all, she had sex with a person in the army, and they just left and then never saw her, so she was abandoned. Yeah. And second of all, she had all these fantastical plans for her sisters, to the point where her sisters believed her, and they are still single now because of her. So and then you have this, like, she confides in Fridolin, and then they get married anyways. So you have this woman that's just like, I am ashamed because this daughter isn't even like his. I am constantly reminded of my mistake every single time I see you.
Yeah.
Every single time I see you. But your father, for some reason, loved you as if you were his, right? But I'm constantly reminded, so I will not let my daughters do the same thing that I did, which is have sex, and I will not let my daughters just marry anyone, because even though my husband loves me and really cares for me, I want you to have better, because my life, I couldn't fulfill my fantasies for my sisters, and I ruined their lives, but I will definitely commit to fulfilling yours, right? So it's like the whole time she was doing this out of guilt and fear that her daughters would turn out to be just like her, but she responded in a way where it felt, and it sounded very selfish and very self-serving.
Yeah.
And that's why I could forgive her, because of like that little piece of information that made her who she was.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. She was doing the typical parent thing of, well, I made this mistake, so you're not going to make this mistake, and I'm going to make sure that you don't make this mistake.
Yeah.
And it pushes them further apart.
And partially in a way that I think it's also, if it had actually happened that they married up, I can now live vicariously through my kids, because I believe that this would happen to me. I believe this would happen to my sisters. And now that it hasn't, if I can make sure that this happens to you, that means it happened to me, kind of the very, right?
Yeah. And you have to also give her cut her some slack. Like, once her husband passed away, her only safety was her kids. Yeah. She had nothing left to do. She couldn't operate that boarding house on her own. Yeah. She didn't. In the end, right? She didn't on her own. And we know that Mozart was actually a very kind son-in-law to her, right? Even though they didn't really have much of a relationship, he still took care of her as best as he could, right? But I think that's the thing, is that's why I could forgive her, because I need to jump back in time, to acknowledge her past history, and also acknowledge the time that she lived in. She would have been on the street, right? And that's why she was so quote unquote, the word crazy, right? Because all of a sudden her life literally flashed before her eyes, and all she knew how to do was lash out, because all she's done was lash out.
Yeah. I will say it was very satisfying in that last 50 pages when Josefa came back and they had that full final big blowout. I'm like, everything makes sense on your behavior. When she's like, I talked to my aunt and they said this is what happened, and you got pregnant and knocked up, and I'm like, oh, everything. Okay, this is why you're the way that you are, and this is why you push so hard for your kids. Okay. All right, I guess I can. I still wasn't a fan of her, but like.
Yeah, but I think it's like that. This idea is like not every person is perfect, and not every person is like really set up to be a parent, right? So in this case here, it was just like an example of a lady who just had 4 kids, and she was doing the best that she could based off of her own experiences and her own biases towards men, which is men will leave you. They'll leave you, right? Like even like she probably blamed Fridolin for leaving her too soon, right? He shouldn't have passed away because now I'm by myself. I can never remarry. Look at me. I'm no longer beautiful, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. So, and also like I mean, moving away from the mother as well, is just like even jumping into the feelings of the kids, like Constance, right? She's like, oh, my name is Constance. I'm the constant in the family. My job is to keep the family together. That is why I was named Constance. And you're like, wow, the pressure that you have to feel to be that glue, even though that's not your, like, you have no power to keep your sisters together. You have no power to see who falls in love with who, right? But like just the pressure of that's who you are.
Yeah.
Right? Because you were named that way.
Is always sort of walking on eggshells and trying to, like, you know, it's the same thing with Sophie, where Sophie was like, I always tried to, I lent my things freely, and I didn't want to ever cause any problems because, you know, the 2 older sisters were so
like this, the
younger 2 ended up kind of trying to like, no, we're okay, we're family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you think of the pressures that they had to, because between even like Josefa came, she's like, I'm already this many years old. Who's gonna want to marry me? I'm an old spinster now, right? Yeah. And the lying of having her lovers. And I remember at the end thinking, like, out of all 4 of those girls, Sophie was probably the one that probably was the most freed, like not independent, but, and I don't want to say the least pressured, but she kind of was, because they didn't really, there were mentions of her getting married to Mozart and stuff like that. And she's like, meh, I love God. I want to be a nun. Off she went to be a nun. So she kind of, I don't want to say she escaped, but she kind of did. I know she got married later, but during this time when all this attention was on Alonzia, I think you pronounce it, Alonzia, and Constance, there was so much of her. Sophie's like, all right, well, if Mozart wants to be with Constance, I'm going to go head out with the father and see you guys later.
Yeah. I think the interesting, like, perspective that the author took on this was the idea that you have these 4 sisters, but 2 of them are extremely talented in music. One of them is okay, and then Sophie is not talented in music at all. She doesn't sing, she doesn't do anything, right? But because of music, it ruined the relationship of the family, because they were all at one point interconnected with Mozart or stuff like that, or they were constantly battling each other. Like as an oldest brother of 4 4 brothers, I wouldn't know how it would feel if my other brothers were way more successful than me and I was not as successful, not as pretty, not as whatever. Like, how would I feel if my brother Daniel, Silas, or Joshua all were super successful, super handsome, and just doing all this great stuff, and I was just too tall? You know, I just wasn't good enough. You know what I mean? Like, how would I feel as an the oldest son or the oldest sibling, knowing that I was taught to be the example, be the role model, and then all of a sudden my younger siblings are doing way better than me? You know what I mean? Like, that's why I could sympathize with Josefa. I could sympathize with these names, Aloysia, Sia, I don't know. Aloysia. Like, I could sympathize with her because it was just like, oh, you're the pretty one and you're the talented one. You better do well. You're my prettiest daughter. You better marry well because you're going to marry a baron because you're so pretty, right? I was like, I could understand that. It's like, I mean, boo-hoo, pretty person having like pretty problems. But that is also a lot of stress, right? Constance being like the glue that had to be, and then you had Sophie, who, because she was the youngest, all 3 of the sisters protected her.
Yeah.
She was free to just say whatever she wanted because she was like, I'm flat as a board and I'm nearsighted and my mom doesn't even think I'm going to get married because she's just like, you're not even a girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, so like all of these girls were damaged.
Yeah.
Right? Damaged in their own way, but I could each feel for them of their individual and unique circumstances, and how it's like, oh, in this not even, let's say, like, not even the parents. The world is pitting you against each other because of all of your different unique abilities and talents.
Yeah.
But you still have to be loving sisters and be together, right? That's what we taught you. You have to be chaste. But the world loves, Aloysia's voice. Sorry, like Josefa, and we know that Josefa became famous later in other parts of the European continent. But it's just like, could you imagine, right? Constantly being pitted against each other, constantly being compared, and of course, like, at one point, like, relationships are going to fray and feelings are going to get hurt, right? Like, even down to like Aloysia still has my slippers. Why does she not give back my slippers? Right? It's just like, oh, because she's just always decided, I'm just going to take whatever I want. Because I bet you her parents were just like, okay, we're going to give you what you want.
But that's pretty standard of the time. And if you do have a family of a bunch of girls, unfortunately, you choose the ones that's the prettiest, that has the most talent. And you're like, all right, we're hedging our money on you to help out our family and to marry up. And then maybe later, the others will follow. And if they have advantageous marriages, good for them. But we're putting our money on you, which is an unfortunate truth of this time. But it does make unfortunate sense that the mom's like, you are our meal ticket. You have to find, I have my list of high ranking men for you, and we gotta make our match so that we can solidify your future.
Yeah. The first marriage kind of sets the tone, right?
Yeah.
And brings upon, it's like how in Pride and Prejudice, it was described that Jane, even though she was the oldest, she was also the prettiest.
Yeah.
So of course she's going to marry the best. Like, she's going to be the person that finds somebody.
Yeah.
Who ends up finding the best person is Lizzie, who's sort of like plain. She's not plain. Like, she's not ugly, but
she's not as pretty. She's not as smart. She's not as charming as the older sister. And a lot of times, if your oldest is the daughter, you put all your energy into that oldest daughter to have her ready for when she turns 18 and to marry up. Mostly just because I've read a lot of stuff from this kind of era.
But I think that's the thing. It's like through reading the story, I got a sense of like, okay, like, the music kept this family together, but also tore it apart.
Yeah.
Right. And but it was how the music was used. When Fridolin was still around, he used the music as a way to educate his daughters to the outside world, to meet people, to interact and have fun. Right. Yeah. It was his way of keeping the family together. And then when music was used to tear the family apart, it was because of competition. Like, either because of competition for love, or for position, or for career, or for opportunities, right? So it's like, okay, the same thing can do two completely different things for a family.
Well, I think when Fridolin died, that love and that heart of that family is just kind of like gone. Because it's just he was the one. He's like, come around my family, come around my sweet little daughters. Let's do this. Let's have this party. Let's meet these people. Like, the heart was gone after he passed. And it wasn't even like he had an illness. He just literally like dropped dead one day. So there was no way for them to prepare for it. And it's tragic that Josefa found him and she's singing for him because that's the gift that he gave her. And the mom's like, no, don't do that. How dare you? You are the worst kid in the world. How dare you sing? Like, she was kind of set up to kind of fail, I feel, in a lot of ways, because the guilt that was on the mother was put on her the entire time, right? So, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just, like I said, like, I don't think there was ever any character that I despised or disliked, simply because, I mean, probably disliked, but simply because there was so much humanity that was written into each of these characters that I could be like, you know what? Yes, you did some really bad decisions, but I can understand why you made those decisions. Like, back then it's like, you know, why would you ever want your daughter to run away with a rock musician?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. It's just like, no, you don't want your daughters to be harmed or hurt.
Yeah.
And these musicians, they could just like, you know, like this is a man's world. They could just take your, like, you know, your virginity and then run away, and then you'll be destitute, just like how my lover took my virginity and left me, and then I had to settle, right? But it's just like, and it's so funny because like after like so long, like the revelation is, oh, actually, no, you didn't settle. You were lucky to marry our father. You were lucky that he loved you despite all of this, in spite of all of this. And he loved me more than anything in the world, even with your imperfections and all your lies and all your machinations. He still stuck around. Yeah. Right. And it's just like it's so interesting. And you're like, oh, like I can forgive you because of the trauma that you felt. And I mean, I don't agree with it, but I can still forgive you for being the person you are, because that's how life pushed you, right, towards that. And that's how your inner insecurities made you feel in the end. Like you could never be secure. You could never be fully loved by your husband because you never loved yourself, because you always thought that you made all these mistakes. You had all these like kind of guilts in you, right? So it's like, in the end, I could still forgive her. She wasn't my favorite character, but I could understand why she did the things she did. Crazy in a lot of cases, but I can understand.
There's a lot of this book that was very much like, this is in some ways such a tragedy when you read about some of the situations they're in, and how they just like all that they want is just so they just want to be human. They want to have love. They want to be pretty. They want to have this. They're all just human. And then just all these like roadblocks that get just thrown in their way, and it's unfortunate. But it, like for me, I enjoyed it. I, like you said, it's a quick read. Yeah, and I'm interested in the Weber sisters now. I want to go listen to her, "The Queen of the Night" by Josefa Weber.
Yeah, I am. Like I said, like I it's one of those few times where I was like, I'm like, okay, I'm only interested if it's about music, and if it's not about music, I won't look it up. But having said that, there is actually quite a lot of information on the other sisters.
Yeah.
Right? Just because they did have a career, they did have a very successful career, and I mean, what better way than to have one of the best musicians at the time write for you because you were their muse?
Yeah.
Right. It's like I think it just that's what's really cool is like I didn't know going into this book just how interconnected the Weber family was with Mozart. I knew that when Mozart married Constance, that Leopold was like, no, you can marry her, but I'm not coming to your wedding, and he didn't, right? But it's like I didn't understand just how interconnected everything was. Like I didn't even know that there was a character named Constance, right, in one of his operas until like, you know, right? And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that he wrote the Queen of the Night aria or the Queen's role for Josefa specifically. I didn't know he wrote those those horn pieces and variations for his best friend. Like it just gives all these pieces a renewed personality that I didn't have. Like, because like they're just pieces and like K numbers to me. But now it's like, oh, he wrote this for his best friend. That's really cool. Right. And it makes it more interesting now, like to like dive into his life, knowing that he like, I mean, I don't want to say it pulls him down to earth, but like it's interesting knowing that even one of the most revered musicians and composers that we know struggled for most of his career. Right? That like this whole child prodigy thing ruins people like him too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're good. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Well, I'm glad that it was a quick read. I think it's like, especially right now during this year, I think we all needed like just light reading, something that was kind of fun, right?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, so many backstabs and double crosses in this book.
Definitely, yeah.
You wouldn't think they were going to war.
Hey, marriage is war, man.
Yeah, I mean,
marriage. Yeah.
I'm the only person that's still single. I'm still single. I mean, you guys are in loving relationships, but thank God I'm still single. I just like, oh man, this is crazy. But that probably concludes our time together today. Amanda, it is your pick next time. Do you have something ready?
I do, because apparently I bought a crap ton of books about music and stuff, so I picked one. Okay, so mine might be a little bit heavier than the Marrying Mozart. It's called The Conductor. And it is the crackle of a tannoy breaks the expectant silence, and during the pause, in the boom of artillery shells, music washes over the city of Leningrad. The defiant symphony infiltrates ruined homes and empty streets, echoing beyond the besieged walls to the very heart of the German forces. Its composer is Shostakovich, Leningrad's most famous son, but this is only partly his story. This is the story of a man caught in the white heat of obsession, a man who galvanized a ragged orchestra of half-starved musicians into an act of resistance and hope that would inspire an entire city. This is the story of Karl Eliasberg, the conductor. Yeah.
That sounds like a good winter read.
Yeah.
In Leningrad, I was there was that one, and then there's like another one that I wasn't like super into. But this was the one that piqued my interest. We'll see. Maybe I'll change it later. But like, this is, I read this and I'm like, interesting because it's not, we've always looked at the composers and now, the composers I know, and this is a conductor who is, we haven't quite looked at those before. But yeah, it's a little bit heavier, I'm sorry. But we're going into a break soon, so maybe this will.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, we started off meeting every 2 months, and I think because of COVID, like, we've become a lot more flexible with everything. So it's like, I think it's like, you know, if we meet in January or even February, that's totally fine as long as you get to read it. It's funny because there's in the digital bookstore, there's 2 versions of this. They're from the same person, but one of them is Dr. Sarah Quigley, the other one's Sarah Quigley, and the one with Dr. Sarah Quigley is $1 more expensive.
I honestly don't.
You're paying 50 cents more for each letter.
Yeah, I don't
pretty much.
Actually, I don't actually know. I don't know. I bought this like a while ago.
Oh, so. It's all good. Don't worry about it. I mean, also, it's not that long.
No, it's not.
It's actually shorter than my book too.
My copy is exactly 300 pages.
Yeah, it's like 304 pages or something like that. Yeah, this is going to be shorter than even the book that I chose.
Yeah. Ooh, it has a staff in it.
That's how we know it's truly a music book.
It's got a full piano.
All right, so for those of you who have been following us, that's our next pick, The Conductor by Sarah Quigley. I'm going to buy this on my iPad immediately and then probably start reading it soon. I'm actually in the middle of reading a bunch of other stuff, but I'm going to get through this soon, and then we'll see each other again whenever we see each other. We're trying to be fluid and flexible right now because all 3 of our lives are kind of a little bit insane at the current moment. But thank you guys so much for joining us. This hopefully you guys also enjoyed reading Marrying Mozart. It was fun. I was glad it was light and it wasn't too heavy. I think after I can't remember the name of the Mahler book. Sorry?
Ecstasy.
Yeah, Ecstasy. I was like, that one. That one for me, I felt even more feelings for. I was like,
we're making Matt feel.
No, because I was like, I mean, and here's the thing, that's not your fault because I picked those books, but but it's like
emotions.
I know, but I was like reading them and I was just like, oh man, this is how it feels to marry a musician. I feel bad for someone who's going to marry me in the future. Constantly just up and down emotions all the time. You love me, I hate you, you know. But we'll see each other again next time. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.